I want to briefly introduce my two co-panelists today. Bill Finney, Manager, ESG and Compliant Advisory from KPMG. Thanks, Bill, for being here. And following Bill in the presentation order will be Lauren Enright, Program Manager, Water Services at SCS Global Services. Thanks, Lauren, for being here as well. Some of you may notice that we're short one presenter. Unfortunately, Mark Yamauchi, who's the Sustainability Manager for Toyota Motor North America, had an illness and was unable to participate this morning in the webinar. I'm going to cover just a few talking points on Mark's behalf a little bit later in this presentation. But in the case of Mark and Toyota, but also Bill and Lauren, if you've got any specific follow-up questions after this and you want to reach out individually to any of the presenters, including myself, please feel free to do that, and we'll have our contact information available for you all. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. The first is remain muted throughout the presentation. The other is we are going to save some time at the end for question and answer. Please submit your questions to the chat function, to the chat box, and that's how we will address questions at the end of the presentation. So we're going to go in order, myself, then Bill, then Lauren, and then we'll get to Q&A. All right, with that, I think let's get going into my presentation, again, with the focus on our WAVE program here at the Water Council. Again, I'm Vice President of Water Stewardship at the Water Council. For those of you that might not be familiar with the Water Council, we are a 501c3 headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are considered a leading global water hub, and we have a well-established and developed ecosystem when it comes to all things water. We're also one of the only water-related nonprofits that cover both innovation and technology, as well as water stewardship. And in fact, we are leading the way on intentionally connecting water stewardship with innovation and technology. So a full continuum of services is something that we really seek to deliver to our partners, to our clients globally. And so we do work globally on water challenges, both water quantity and quality related issues. We have over 120 members. A majority of our members are based in North America, but we have a good portion of our membership also out of Europe and Asia as well. One thing that does make us unique in terms of our established ecosystem and water hub is the fact that we have private sector members, private sector participants, but also public sector, academic groups, nonprofit, civil society, et cetera. So it's a very diverse group of individuals and members that help support our mission here at the Water Council. But specifically today, we're here to really talk about water stewardship and, again, our WAVE program. At the Water Council, we've got over a decade of experience working on water stewardship related issues. We really began our work in earnest through the development and partnership around the Alliance for Water Stewardship. We helped develop and set up that organization. We helped set up the administration of the program in North America and ran the program here for a number of years. And it was really out of that experience working with the Alliance for Water Stewardship and running and overseeing the standard in North America that we really began to learn some important lessons that we would end up applying as we developed our WAVE program. First of all is really related to building that business case for water stewardship in North America. Unfortunately, we suffer many of the same water stresses and challenges that other regions globally face, but there are some unique features in terms of making the business case here in the US, Canada, and Mexico. And so we've really brought that experience to bear as we developed the WAVE program. We also helped develop the credentialing program for the Alliance for Water Stewardship. And so that experience and really relaying best practices to professionals and how to apply water stewardship, both at the enterprise level, but also at the site level, is something that we've also carried forward into our work on WAVE and beyond. And last but not least, we've got a really wide array of experience working with large multinational corporations all the way down to small family-owned businesses on water stewardship issues. And as we say at the Water Council, everything from dairies to data centers, we've done it in terms of water stewardship projects and applications. So we carry all that forward into our suite of water stewardship programs that we have here at the Water Council. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these programs. Next slide, please, Stacy. We do offer water stewardship advisory services as well as capacity building and training. We don't necessarily advertise these too much. We really handle them on an as needed and as demanded basis. But I will say that right now, 2 of our water stewardship advisory services clients and partners are really interesting case studies on how to bring transformative change to a sector. And so we're currently partnering with the American Chemistry Council, as well as the Suppliers Partnership for the Environment. The American Chemistry Council is obviously the chemistry sector, trade association based in DC, while Suppliers Partnership is really focused more on the supply base for the automotive industry, and the automotive OEMs are a part of that organization, also based out of DC. And in both cases, working in partnership with those organizations to develop both tactical and strategic water stewardship approaches for their memberships. So if you're interested in more, technical or customized advisory services, feel free to let us know after this presentation. But again, what really brings you here and us here today is really the focus on our WAVE program, our Water Stewardship Verified program. Next slide. So I don't think you really even need a slide these days to bring home the fact that there really is no escaping water challenges right now in the US, certainly North America, and obviously globally. I've just got a little snapshot here up on the screen from Aqueduct, the Aqueduct Water Risk Atlas tool. And just looking at baseline water stress in the US on the left and future projections for 2030 on the right. One thing just to note on this particular slide is this is based off of the older data from Aqueduct. As many of you know, it was just updated in August. And unfortunately, that update paints an even more bleak picture in terms of the future water stress in 2030. A lot more red areas on the right-hand side going down the east coast of the United States, and more solid red all the way up from our Great Plains into the prairie provinces of Canada. So again, whether you're operating entirely within the US or you have supply chains within the US or North America, chances are somewhere in your operations or supply chain, you're facing now or imminently will be facing some water challenges. Again, whether that's too much water, not enough water, water of poor quality, deteriorating infrastructure, again, you name it. These are challenges right now that many organizations are facing. And as we continue to see the headlines in the news just over the past couple of weeks, we know we're feeling climate impacts right now through water. Climate is water. It's not a far off impact that's going to happen at some point down the road. Right now, we are feeling the impacts from climate change to our water resources. And so it's really because of these conditions that we felt there was a need to develop our WAVE Water Stewardship Verified program. Next slide, please. What it is a risk assessment framework to help companies and organizations of all shapes and sizes really understand what those baseline water uses, impacts, and risks are as an organization, and then ultimately what they need to do about it. What's the roadmap to address those risks and to address those challenges and opportunities? And in fact, as far as we know, WAVE is the world's only verification protocol that helps to define and recognize, as well as reward, enterprise-wide water stewardship or corporate water stewardship. We know what good water stewardship looks like at a site, at a factory level, at the farm level, at an office building, but there's less consensus about what good enterprise and corporate water stewardship looks like. So this was another driving factor behind the development of this program, was to add to this conversation globally, credibly, what it looks like to better define, recognize, and reward that enterprise-wide water stewardship. As I mentioned, WAVE is an assessment framework. It's built on a plan, do, check, act approach to helping you better understand what your water uses and impacts are. WAVE is flexible enough to cover organizations where most of that water use or risk lives within direct operations, but it also works for organizations where most of that risk might be in the supply chain or value chain. And in fact, we're going to hear a little bit later from Bill at KPMG talking about their experience with the WAVE program as a service-oriented organization. So again, we really have seen the flexibility of this assessment framework in practice now that it's been around for just over a year and a half. We want you, through that understanding of your water uses and impacts, then to really have a more fulsome understanding of risk and really expand that water risk radar so you fully understand those physical, reputational, and regulatory risks. Ultimately, we want that to lead to action. So WAVE requires you to prioritize where you're going to focus your water stewardship efforts, both at the site level, so looking at direct operations that as relevant, but also potentially, again, in sourcing regions or in partnership with others in your supply chain. Prioritize those areas or those places where you're going to spend your finite time and resources addressing water risks. WAVE also asks you to put together a list of actions that might need to take place across the enterprise, whether that's installing meters across the board in your facility or potentially updating your environmental management system and ensuring it has water aspects in it. WAVE will contemplate both changes in both approaches as needed by the organization going through the program. Ultimately, the other major output from the program is developing an organizational water policy or commitment statement that is directly responsive to how you use and impact water resource. It's a contextual policy and commitment statement. So it's not just aspirational, it's directional. And again, it's responsive to how your organization not only can mitigate risk, but also contribute positively to water outcomes in the watersheds where you operate and or source. Ultimately, again, as I said at the beginning, WAVE really works for any company or organization in any sector operating anywhere globally. In fact, we've been pleasantly surprised over the year and a half since we've launched this program that we have publicly traded corporations, we have privately held companies, we even have universities, and we're having conversations right now with utilities as well. So the protocol, the plan, do, check, act approach is truly flexible and applicable to all those different types of organizations. Next slide, please. One question we do get asked a lot when companies or organizations is, where does WAVE fit within the range of organizations and tools that currently exist for water stewardship? This slide is not comprehensive. It's not meant to be comprehensive. There are many more organizations and tools, but this is just simply a snapshot of the water stewardship journey and some common points that companies seem to know along this journey. Looking at the left-hand side, probably one of the most well-known and impactful, at least at the CEO level globally, is the CEO water mandate, where companies sign up, make that CEO level commitment on water stewardship. WAVE fits in nicely after that commitment, whether it's made through the mandate or just simply a CEO or leadership level commitment on water stewardship. WAVE can help operationalize that ambition from the C-suite or from the boardroom and make it real out onto the shop floor. And then WAVE sits nicely, of course, right in the risk assessment portion of that water stewardship journey, really providing that foundation from which you can develop actions, targets, goals, and begin doing site level work, moving all the way over to the right. And so it was intentionally built to be complementary to a wide range of water stewardship programs and tools and standards that are already out there. WAVE will give you that roadmap at the end of the day where you need to focus your efforts to do something like ISO 14001 or apply science-based targets. So that's how WAVE fits into the water stewardship journey. And again, quick snapshot in terms of just some of the organizations that touch on water stewardship. Next slide, please, Stacy. Thanks. The other thing that we hear from companies, especially companies and organizations that are new to water stewardship, is there's a high learning curve. There's a high barrier to entry. There can be perceived high barriers to entry into water stewardship. And so WAVE really cuts through the complexity of that lexicon and some of those practices and terms that are really unique to water stewardship. I mentioned that it helps operationalize that ambition that the leadership that the C-suite have on water stewardship and makes that real across the organization. We like to say it helps bridge the gap between that intention and implementation, that execution gap that we hear a lot about in terms of water stewardship, where companies understand the importance of water to their operations or communities, but yet they can't yet, or for some reason, aren't making the leap to doing the appropriate risk assessments and target and goal setting. WAVE helps you accomplish that. It provides that foundation for that long-term water strategy. And then ultimately, it results in actions and in outcomes that can be transparently and credibly reported. And in fact, a lot of that is built on our verification program that's required as part of participation in WAVE. And we do that exclusively through our partnership with SCS Global Services. And we'll hear more from Lauren in a little bit on the importance of verification and what SCS brings to the table in terms of their credibility and expertise on verification programs. So WAVE adds that extra credibility and assurance to your stakeholders so that they know that when you start building your water strategy and implementing targets and goals, that they're directly responsive to your use of water, impacts water resources, as well as risks. Next slide, please. So the WAVE process is essentially a multi-step approach. It's actually 6 steps. We've only got 4 up here on the screen, but these are really the key steps to the program. One thing I should mention is every organization that signs up to participate in WAVE also gets a 1 year's membership in the Water Council. But going through the WAVE steps themselves, I've already more or less highlighted this, but again, providing indicators and metrics to help you, again, gather the appropriate data and information to understand how you're using water across the enterprise, how you're potentially impacting those watersheds where you operate or source, and then ultimately based on that operational use profile, because we will build an operational use profile as you go through the steps of the WAVE program, we'll then bring in the aspect of the watershed risk assessment. And it's not just a high level watershed risk assessment. There's some deeper digging in terms of source water and things of that nature that we really want you to kind of dive into and get a better understanding at a more localized and granular level, kind of what that risk might be to your operations based on where you're operating. Ultimately, as we said, we want to get to a point where you can prioritize action. We don't want you spending a lot of money on sites where you've sort of prejudged what the outcomes might be in terms of water use or risk. Follow the process. Develop a priority list of sites where you're going to focus your actions on. And then you can be certain that, again, as you spend those finite resources, that you're doing the right things at the right facilities and that you understand what the water conditions are that are driving risk at those facilities. So that roadmap, that prioritized list of sites or actions is really impactful for you to take the next step and act in terms of addressing those risks and addressing those challenges and opportunities. We also mentioned, or I also mentioned previously, that you're going to develop that corporate water policy or commitment statement. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet, which is the last step of the WAVE program, is there is a communication requirement as part of this. We do want you to obviously communicate, number one, publicly that you've gone through the program. So describing at a high level, our organization went through, assessed use, assessed impact and risk. This is what we've learned. So that's the second thing. We went through this. The second thing is this is what we've learned as an organization in terms of our uses, impacts, and risks. And then the third thing is at a high level, what we intend to do about that as an organization. So you're sending a signal to your stakeholders that you've taken on this data and this information, you understand the risks and the challenges, and this is what you're planning to do about it as an organization. We think that's really important. There is also, if you just click once more, Stacy, there is also a logo and a claim statement that companies get as a result of achieving verification. I mentioned every company that signs up for WAVE, you are required to move forward and to seek that independent verification. Assuming you achieve it, you receive a logo and a claim statement at the enterprise level or at the corporate level that you can then turn around and use in external reporting, that you can use on websites and social media, and really talk about what you're doing as a company, as an organization around water stewardship and what you've learned as a result of the WAVE program. So that's a very important component to the WAVE program, again, is the fact that we will be required to seek that independent verification. Next slide, Stacy. So just to summarize, kind of some of the things that we've covered, and we're going to hear more from Bill in a minute here. He's going to get a little bit more into the details of the program, and you'll actually see some of the steps and kind of the data and some of the thought processes that KPMG went through as they walked through the protocol. So I've kept it a little bit high level on purpose. I didn't want to steal Bill's thunder, but you'll see again, some of the benefits that lead from verification around proactive communication to your stakeholders about what you're doing on water stewardship. Obviously, there's a leadership opportunity here, no matter the sector that you're in or the area of the globe that you're operating in. There's that leadership potential from completing WAVE and achieving the verification. I mentioned that there's these different complementary approaches that WAVE kind of fits into this water stewardship journey, whether that's starting with something like the mandate, making that CEO level commitment. WAVE helps you do the risk assessment and put together that roadmap for action. And then ultimately now you've got a short list of sites where you really need to mostly focus your action in terms of risk. And you can do very site specific things like science-based targets or AWS. One important item, of course, is that WAVE, of course, aligns with SDG 6 on water. But just as importantly, we also have a crosswalk between WAVE and CDP and GRI. So if you haven't done CDP or GRI and you go through WAVE, you're going to develop a lot of the actions, outcomes, data metrics, et cetera, those things that are reportable within those frameworks. If you're already doing one or two or both of those frameworks, reporting frameworks, you're going to have the necessary data, action, information that you need to successfully complete WAVE. So there's really great synergy between WAVE and CDP and GRI. And of course, again, I can't emphasize this enough. When it comes to water, this is so important. Water isn't fungible in the same way that carbon is. It does require a different analytical lens. WAVE provides that, and it provides that assurance then to your stakeholders that you're not just doing random acts of kindness when it comes to water. You're strategically focusing on doing the right things at the right times and at the right places. Next slide, Stacy. Just in terms of the snapshot of right now who's in the program, we have 3 verified organizations. Again, we launched last year in February, so we're just over a year and a half right now in terms of length of the program's existence. We're actually into WAVE version 1.1. We've already made some updates based on real world usage. But our 3 verified companies right now are Watts Water, Nutrien, and A.O. Smith. And then the rest of these organizations you can see here are in various stages of going through the different steps of the WAVE program. And a couple companies are basically in the process of verification. And we have another 10 or so organizations that we're actively working with right now to bring into the program. Just one thing, again, I want to point out is sort of the diversity of types of organizations here. We have some food and beverage, we have some chemistry, chemical, petrochem, we have some traditional manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, agribusiness. We have a couple universities. So again, the point here is this is really a flexible protocol, a step-by-step approach to assessing and understanding risk. And if you're new to water stewardship, if you've been doing water stewardship for a while and you're looking to refine or revise a strategy, WAVE is the assessment framework for you. And we'd love, of course, to talk to you and learn more about your water program and ambition. So with that, I did want to mention just briefly that, again, we were unfortunately unable to be joined by Mark Yamauchi from Toyota Motor North America. Mark asked me just to say just a few brief words in terms of Toyota's experience to date with the WAVE program. So I'm not going to get very deep. And again, I encourage you, if you're interested in Mark's story or Bill or Lauren's, feel free to reach out to them directly after this webinar. But just in terms of Mark and Toyota, they're in the process of putting together their water strategy as an organization. And for them, WAVE was that foundational piece to help build that baseline on which they can then start developing their targets and their goals as a corporation. I think right now they're in the process of putting together that water policy or commitment statement. I think they're working with Will Sarney at Water Foundry on that aspect of the program. And again, that's a great example of how you can pull in, existing partners that you're already working with to help you work through the WAVE program. The other thing that Mark wanted me to mention, and something I'm also aware of in terms of the work that we do, they're also working through the Suppliers Partnership for the Environment, which again is the Automotive Supply Base Trade Association, and looking at opportunities in the supply chain as well in terms of their water strategy. So it's not just focusing entirely on direct operations, but again, what do we need to do in partnership with others in our supply chain to achieve our water ambition? And WAVE is flexible enough to help companies do that, whether the focus is going to be internally on direct ops, or again, it's going to be some combination of both, or even entirely looking at the supply chain, because that's where most of your water use and risk lives. So a really good story from Mark. I wish I could do it better justice than I just did. But again, feel free to reach out to him and Toyota for more information. So Toyota's a little bit different than KPMG, right? Toyota with manufacturing and that large supply chain. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill now, and he's going to tell us the KPMG story and really explain to us why WAVE for them and kind of what they've learned up to this point in time. So Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Matt. All right, we can jump to the next slide, Stacy. So my name is Bill Finney. I sit within KPMG's ESG and climate advisory practice. My background before KPMG was in environmental engineering, specifically in water. So designing and building water infrastructure, including drinking water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, pipelines, and pumping stations. And now as part of the ESG and climate advisory team at KPMG, we help organizations with ESG strategy, ESG and climate risk, decarbonization, and ESG due diligence. So just to provide a quick overview of those, kind of why it's relevant to water. So with regards to ESG strategy, we help clients identify what their various stakeholders want and expect from them, and then advise how to integrate ESG into their operating model. For ESG and climate risk, this includes helping organizations understand how they'll be affected by a changing climate and new regulations, and then advising how they can be more prepared for a transition to a low carbon economy. Within decarbonization, we help our clients determine where their greenhouse gas emissions are, and then what are the most effective levers to reduce emissions. And then with due diligence services, for organizations interested in buying or selling a company, we help our clients understand, how that company is managing ESG topics and if they're in compliance with regulatory requirements. So, of course, we recognize that water is a critical component of the ESG and climate framework that we assist our clients with on a daily basis. And given the importance of water, we developed an alliance with the Water Council to collaborate for and promote corporate water stewardship and the associated ESG reporting. So at KPMG, we felt that WAVE was a good fit for us because WAVE is complementary to the ESG journey that we often guide our clients through, which includes assessing current state through baseline and inventory assessments, conducting future state visioning and scenario planning, and then prioritization of those initiatives, developing a roadmap for implementation to achieve on that future state, and then operationalizing the plan with ongoing monitoring and reporting. So if you can jump to the next slide. So why WAVE? So KPMG is a professional services firm. As Matt already mentioned, we're not a major consumer of water, not a manufacturer. We provide tax, audit, and advisory services. So why would we go through the WAVE process? So first, we have a robust internal sustainability and ESG program where we've recognized the importance of environmental and social programs to the firm. And we felt that WAVE was an important step for specifically demonstrating our commitment to water stewardship. We recognize that water is a critical resource. It's important to the economy, nature and ecosystems, and of course, our own drinking water. And we want to be a responsible member of that community of water users. And a big driver for us was understanding the risks and vulnerabilities of the watersheds where we exist, because that's crucial to ensuring long-term sustainability and resiliency of both ecosystems and communities. Next, we believe that water is undervalued. So pricing is often distorted, which results in the use of the resource that's not aligned with its true value to the community or to an organization. And then finally, just from a strategic water management perspective, we wanted to go through this process ourselves, really understand our own water uses and risks, and then make impactful changes within our organization so that we can better advise our clients in their own ESG and water stewardship journeys. And let's go to the next slide. So our wave assessment focused on our 2 owned facilities where KPMG has direct operational control. So this included our Florida training facility that has 900 guest rooms, as well as a New Jersey office space that includes data centers. We also have numerous leased office spaces that I'll discuss a little bit later on, but as related to our direct operational control, we focused our assessment on our owned facilities in Florida and New Jersey. So as part of the WAVE process, we reviewed documentation such as utility bills and stormwater management plans. We utilized online tools to assess water risk. Matt already mentioned some of these, but for example, using the WRI and WWF tools to assess water risk. We went through documentation from state utility commissions, utility policies, and rate cases, reviewed annual drinking water quality reports, as well as other information related to water risks at the utility, county, and state levels. And a critical component for us was also engaging with facility staff and understanding how they manage the buildings, what information they're already collecting, and what tools they have at their disposal. And we realized through this process how big of an impact the facilities personnel can have on management and operations of the building, which of course includes water use. And then finally, we conducted a walkthrough of our 900 guest room Florida training facility and gained a lot of value, seeing firsthand where and how water is used throughout the building and across the grounds, and understanding how water fits into maintenance practices, and learning how water use is monitored on site. So if we jump to the next slide, I'll take you through some of our results and analyses at a high level. These are, we dug in deep with water risks and water uses. So these are just some example analyses. So we used various tools to assess water risk. And this is just one example, being the WRI Aqueduct Risk Atlas. So the water risk assessment helped us look at our locations as related to water quantity, quality, and then also regulatory and reputational risk. And this process helped us understand the specific risks of the watershed where our properties are located. So one of the takeaways was to really communicate is that water is a local resource, and as the Water Council says, water challenges are, and their corresponding risk to businesses are hyper-local. So this was a useful exercise in looking at the specific locations and understanding the unique risks based on the watersheds where the facilities are located. So it was important for KPMG to conduct this risk assessment. It allowed us to identify potential risks and vulnerabilities that our operations may pose to the surrounding environment and community. So really seeing this as a two-way street where we're exposed to certain risks. We're exposed to certain risks from the watersheds where we operate, but our operations also have an impact on the environment and the watershed around us. And then we can jump into some of the water use analyses on the next slide. So here you can see we analyzed historical water use at our own facilities. So this is for the Florida location. And we looked at water use throughout the year and also focused on water use at specific meters to define how water was actually being used on site. So for the example of Florida, we have 7 meters that included a main building meter for the hotel and conference center, guest rooms, dining and meal prep, and then associated sanitary operations. We also have a makeup meter that measures water use in the cooling system. There's a separate meter for one of the ancillary buildings on site that provides dining services. And then we had 3 separate irrigation meters which source reclaimed water from the same utility. And this was a helpful exercise for us to understand how we use water and perhaps where specific uses are not known, such as where sub-meters don't exist and could provide more granular data around water use. So as you can see, we also analyzed water across each month so that we could see seasonal changes in water use. And that helped us further understand when we're using water, determining why that is, and then identifying if there's opportunities to reduce. And as part of this process, we also looked at water use as an intensity metric. So for a manufacturing company, water intensity might be volume of water per unit manufactured, but for our analysis of the Florida facility, the most relevant water intensity metric was per guest room night. And this will help us further benchmark our own water use against similar facilities. So in this case, the hospitality industry, to help us further understand where we stand in the sector. And then jumping to the next slide, looked at water use against precipitation. So as previously mentioned, we source reclaimed water for irrigation through the same utility as our drinking water. But reclaimed water is essentially wastewater that has been treated to a certain extent where it can be sent back into a separate distribution system to serve certain uses, such as irrigation. And we found it helpful to analyze our irrigation use against precipitation to better understand spikes and periods of low use. And then while on site, we were able to discuss with facility staff how they try to work with landscapers to analyze water uses in the 3 irrigation zones, looking at total area of each zone and the amount and types of vegetation, and then determine where improvements can be made. And then jumping to the next slide. So overall, the WAVE assessment helped us to demonstrate how we can continue to improve our climate commitments and include water in the larger environmental and climate discussion. So conducting a thorough watershed risk assessment is allowing us to proactively identify potential impacts of our operations and then mitigate risks before they become crises. And by gaining a comprehensive understanding of the watersheds and potential impacts, we as a firm are aiming to implement adaptive management strategies, reduce environmental risks, and then establish long-term sustainability goals. So as we continue to develop our path forward around water stewardship, some of our preliminary initiatives that we may include are remote sensing. So when we sat down with the Florida facility staff, it was interesting to observe the sophisticated tools that measure energy and indoor climate control, while such real-time monitoring wasn't yet implemented for water. So similar to energy monitoring, having the ability to track water use real-time at a more granular level would help us further understand how and where we use water, identify possible leaks and improve overall efficiency. A landscape audit could help us understand water use, based on vegetation in different zones and determine if there's opportunities to improve landscaping practices. With regards to health and safety, it was interesting for us to further understand the flushing policies for vacant guest rooms, as well as flushing of water bottle filling stations and drinking fountains based on chlorine monitoring results. So a possible initiative here would be considering the health and safety policies with water conservation to identify how we can maximize both of those buckets. And then next, raising awareness across our own organization within KPMG. So building water stewardship into our corporate culture and making sure it aligns with our impact plan. And then also transparency outside of the firm. So being open about our water use, our actions around water, and disclosing our future goals and ambitions. And then finally, as I mentioned previously, the majority of our office spaces are leased. And a takeaway for us was the lack of data available to the tenants of leased office spaces. So that's where we really plan to further engage with property managers, gain access into our water use in those spaces, and then drive the dialogue around water stewardship and ultimately see how we can influence our property managers' actions around water. So, just reflecting on the overall WAVE process, we felt WAVE was a great platform and a framework for us to elevate water as an issue and engage with stakeholders in our organization and assess our water practices and risks and work on developing a responsible path forward. And I'll hand it back to you, Matt.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for taking the time to run us through that journey. One of the things that just stuck out for me, just a real quick comment before I turn it over to Lauren, is the importance of data visualization, right? Just seeing that laid out before you in terms of usage and the different types of usage and sort of the cyclical nature of that, I think really leads to better decision making. Lauren, let's turn it over to you and tell us more about SCS and specifically the importance of verification to this program.
Sure. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So Bill, that was awesome just to hear you sort of, run through actually what it is that clients are doing on the ground. And, to the Water Council, it's been an awesome relationship being able to, continually build upon what it is that WAVE is doing, not only as water stewardship, but actually being able to disseminate this information out on a webinar. Because I think it's one thing to be able to do the hard work, what clients are doing in the background, and it's another thing actually being able to visualize that. So my introduction of myself, Lauren Enright, Program Manager, Water Services of SCS Global. My background is in water security, risk management, and it has very much translated into what I care about most is keeping people and companies and clients accountable. And this very much goes into why SCS is a prime partner for the Water Council and WAVE. So to just jump into the first slide, why third-party verification matters. SCS really cares dramatically about credibility, trust for the company's claim at the end of the day. So as Bill's describing what the process is to actually jump through and understand is the risk management around water stewardship, we at SCS like to then go 10 steps beyond that and actually keep those people and clients accountable and transparent to what those numbers, the data points, the reports actually will mean at the end of the day, not only for their stakeholders and investors, but very much for the facility or watershed and their supply chains. So in terms of bringing verification into a deeper perspective, that calls for a sense of continuous improvement upon where, say, KPMG is going to lack in some way and be able to learn from those lessons. Stacy, next slide. So to build upon that, not only does SCS think that third-party verification matters, but we think it's required. And why we think it's required is because it actually communicates to the outside stakeholders, we have done this, that stamp, that outside emblem to not only marketing and branding, but also internally to employees to show them that that work has been done, and then that continuous improvement is going to happen again and again. And I think we all know, just as this party of, quite a few participants on here, that where ESG is going and where water stewardship and stakeholders and investors, we're all moving towards what would be a reporting mechanism to actually understand what is our our credibility at the end of the day for water stewardship. And I think WAVE matters so much as a starting point and as a guiding point, and building upon a strategy in which coming then through full circle to SCS and having them be verified and actually take that credibility to that next level actually protects them against any type of greenwashing that might be a reputational risk in the future. Stacy, next slide. So the actual verification process, as described on this slide, a client would come to us primarily through the WAVE process and MAT. We have outside clients as well that are coming to us. But that's sort of built upon building that relationship, understanding that scope, understanding what sites are being known. Is it primarily within the United States? How many sites is it? Is it a commitment level? Is it in the spirit of? Is it an all enterprise level? And then moving on to step 2 is where the client really is going through and has completed that matrix in order to justify what work they have done in terms of that risk assessment, and understanding, sort of like Bill said, what it is that they could, create as an opportunity for themselves, and what it is that possibly is going to be a risk in the future, all related to supply chains, value chains, and where climate is actually affecting their specific facilities. So our team will go in then as step 3, being able to audit and verify and go through what it is that documentation actually entails. We have one chance to go back to Bill and any other client and be able to have them update, have them resubmit any information. So in terms of the back and forth between clients, we typically like to keep it to one sort of resubmission, that they have a chance to learn from their mistakes and be able to go on and create actually a strong and robust strategy. Once we go through an audit, we then put a stamp of approval on through the SCS audit cycle, and the client would then receive a packet with emblems, and our marketing team then is able to actually steer and guide them as to how they can use that information for their own branding and marketing purposes. So in all respect, it's an amazing program because it's able to see sort of the full cycle of where WAVE has come from and be able to show that to the client and then also to the world. And it's not something that is to be taken lightly. I think this is an amazing process that is something that all clients and customers should be walking through, and I'm sure will in the future. Stacy, next slide. So a little bit about SCS Global Services. We're a global leader in third-party sustainability, certification, consulting. We have stemmed from a very long background of certifications and standards in pesticides and forestry and in carbon, and water sits in there. And it's definitely, like we're all noticing on this webinar, it's a quiet force, and water is something that we know is within every different supply chain and value chain, and whether it's in agriculture or manufacturing, a specific facility, we're going to find that. So that is an overview of what SCS Global Services does. We pride ourselves on how many audits we have done in the past, and I think that that's something going forward we'll keep priding ourselves on. Stacy, next slide. And just to jump into a number of the different sectors, and we have ones even slicing and dicing in that is a number of jewelry seems to be quite popular, and in terms of where we're at in SCS, but in terms of our own specific reach, it is phenomenal in where we're at and where we're going in terms of our standards and holding clients accountable. I can note for myself that being a part of the water program only in the last month or two has opened my eyes to not only the credible people that we work with, my internal team and external stakeholders, but also the seriousness of the work that we do and why we do it, and holding ourselves accountable at the end of the day and asking questions ourselves and being super nerds and going to, you know, the next degree to keep KPMG accountable in their own water stewardship plan. Stacy, next slide. So just as a final wrap up, and Matt, feel free to step back in. If you want to get a hold of me, feel free to email and or take my number. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. I think one thing that really stands out for me again, and you stress this, is the importance of that independent verification piece and the experience that SCS brings to the table in that regard. Just a little side story: when we were beta testing Wave back in 2021 with a couple of different organizations. We weren't actually originally thinking there would be a verification component to the program. And through the beta test, that was something that came back to us loud and clear from the companies themselves, was the importance of that verification piece, because they understand that credibility and that assurance, turning around and talking to stakeholders and communicating what their water stewardship plans are and why they're doing X, Y, and Z. A lot of that hinges on that verification piece. That credibility of assessment and understanding leads to that action. So I appreciate that perspective and our partnership with SCS Global Services. We're kind of running out of time here. I thought we'd have more time for questions, so I'm just going to take moderators kind of prerogative here. I'm going to do just one quick follow-up question each to Bill and Lauren. Bill, I'm just going to start with you. Just to sort of if you're comfortable speaking about any sort of obstacles that you face just in terms of planning or kind of starting implementation, and maybe kind of how you overcame those.
Yep. So I would say one of our big obstacles, Matt, as I mentioned during the presentation, was really that engaging with property managers. So as I mentioned, we focused our wave assessment where we have direct operational control on 2 facilities, but we have dozens of leased office spaces that we don't want to leave out of our water stewardship assessment. So it's really, the obstacle there is really engaging with the property managers and being able to get data from them that is not typically made available to the tenants of leased office spaces. So that's why, one of our next steps of really digging into our water stewardship journey will be continued engagement and forcing that conversation with property managers.
Yeah, that's really good insight, and that's an applicable lesson, right, across sectors, and whether you're a service-oriented organization or manufacturing, is bringing in the operational folks, and specifically too, a lot of times some of the best intel, right, on risk, lives at the operational level. So it's really important as companies think about participating in this program and putting together their project team, and to make sure there's that direct line of communications to operations as well. So thanks for that, Bill. Lauren, just one quick follow-up question for you. Your title is Program Manager for Water Services. What are some of the other water services or programs that SCS has right now or is potentially developing?
Sure. So we're going through a transition right now in relooking at what services we have offered and where we could potentially be a benefit to clients in the future. I think something that is surely a part of what we're doing are e-learnings, our trainings, specifically to get a client more immersed within say water activities, specifically to reuse, replenishment, water usage, and that curtails with a webinar series that we're going to start. And then in conjunction with that, we're building upon more of our technical advisory, which we can utilize internal resources, external stakeholders, and sort of building upon that as well. We're looking at creating a site-specific standard and something to where is actually really utilized for the client's dissemination and benefit of their own use. So I think we have a lot ahead of us in terms of where our road is, but we're looking at multiple facets, integrating technologies, and I'm sure you'll be learning about more in the coming months.
Sounds great. It's exciting stuff, Lauren. Thanks. And we definitely look forward to seeing what you all roll out in terms of your water program. So again, apologies, we kind of ran right up into our time limit here today in terms of questions, but we will follow up with you via email. We'll have a copy of the recording. We'll have a listing of our contact information for Bill, Lauren, myself, as well as Mark from Toyota, who couldn't be with us today. Check us out online. We're at thewatercouncil.com. Check out the WAVE program at waveverified.com. But again, we want to thank you for your time and attention today. Feel free to directly contact us. Any one of us, reach out, talk about the program, learn more about the program, and we're happy to connect you to any of our WAVE participants to have that one-on-one conversation as well. So for my co-panelists and the Water Council, thanks again for joining us on this webinar. I'm Matt Howard. Have a great day.